The title of the show is ROCKFLUX Live 10/2/21. Silly Humans, Tricks Are for Kigs. 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 I'm Tony Caravan. And this is the world's longest improv beat poem by yours truly. Of course, the great Buster Keaton from 1927, The General, where he actually jumped off that train while it was running to pick up that railroad tie. Think about that. It's crazy. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to show you my shirt. Because you don't know what you don't know. As we get comfortable for the next couple hours. And gee, that coffee's hot. And yes, it's already begun. Because this is all part of the trip we're going to take. The trip with the game over. You know, life right now is like a person on the Ed Sullivan Show spinning plates. But imagine if that person's spinning plates, but they're on a trapeze. And imagine that on top of that trapeze, guy or gal spinning those plates. That on top of those plates that are spinning is a house of cards. Do you know what a house of cards is? Did you ever build a house of cards? It's like when you're bored, you play solitaire with real cards, not a computer game. Real cards, a deck of cards, 52 cards. Sometimes you get a joker or two in there. And might get a third card. And that card might have rules on it. Rules on how to play pinochle, gin rummy, maybe even simple poker. Personally, I prefer 7-card stud. That's the one where you put some of the cards down and some of the cards up. So now let's picture this guy or gal who was once on the Ed Sullivan Show, spinning plates on sticks. But now they're at the circus under the big top, where the big elephant is still tied to a tiny stick with a piece of rope, because it was trained when it was a baby elephant with a rope around it, and it couldn't get away because it was a baby elephant, and that stake in the ground and that piece of rope held it in place. But as the elephant got bigger, they kept tying it to the same stake with the same piece of rope. The rope just got bigger. And now at the circus, the elephant's ginormous. But it won't dare try to pull away from that little stake connected to that piece of rope around its neck. Because an elephant's memory is really, really, really long. And it remembers that when it tried as a baby elephant to pull away, it couldn't. So now it doesn't even try. It's conditioned. It actually believes that that piece of rope and that little stake in the ground under the big top can hold this ginormous elephant from breaking loose, tearing down the tent, and mayhem would pursue. And that's what's going on in the elephant's mind for just a split second. Elephant's memory. But under the big top, the trapeze artist, the artiste, is walking across the tightrope. The crowd watches, eating their bags of peanuts. And this trapeze artist, the guy or gal, is spinning plates on a stick that's on top of his head while he's walking across the tightrope. Do you know what the tightrope is? And on top of that plate that's spinning is a house of cards. How is that possible? How is that even possible? Is this a true story? How is it possible to have a house of cards on a spinning plate, on a stick, on a trapeze artiste's head, while he's walking the tightrope under the big top? And not too far from him is an elephant tied to a stake in the ground with a rope attached to his neck, that he could just take one step and the stake would pull right out of the ground. How is that possible? Elephants are intelligent creatures. Very intelligent creatures. And the man drinks his coffee. His glasses steam up a bit for a second because it's hot coffee. The man wears a hat that says "Game Over." Earlier, he stood up and he showed that he was wearing a shirt that said, "You don't know what you don't know." But now that phrase, "You don't know what you don't know," is above his head. And beside his head is the phrase "Game Over," which is also on the hat that the man is wearing. It's amazing. It's quite amazing. Suddenly, everything seemed to turn to black and white. Much like Buster Keaton on the train in the 1927 movie. Everything was real, except the VU meter. The problem with the VU meter was it also had to be in black and white. And the scene was set. The man moved the artwork from the book that said, "Then what?" Do we care about the trapeze artist anymore? And what did the guy mean about tricks are for kids? The glasses steamed up once again, but then cleared quickly because the coffee was gradually losing its heat, which means the man would soon have to pour more coffee from the carafe from the small $9.95 coffee machine that he got at Walmart, that he ordered online and ended up getting free delivery because he ordered $35 worth of stuff. Unlike on Amazon, where if you have Amazon Prime, you get free delivery in 2 days if you sign up for a year. Of course, everything doesn't always come in 2 days. I wonder if that bassman's hand is getting tired. Are you still watching? Times on this channel, this ROCKFLUX channel, which some of you didn't notice. But ROCKFLUX was still in color. Now everything's in black and white. Why did black and white come before color? Black and white photographs, black and white movies, like Buster Keaton, and black and white television sets. And computers didn't have color at first. They used to call IBM Big Blue because they had one color and it was blue. And then there was color. It's a crazy world we live in, my friend. Bass player had a little slip up. He's been playing for a very long time. He's allowed to have a slip up. But if Buster Keaton would have slipped up on that train, he would have been crushed. Run over by a train. Do you think they hollowed out that railroad tie to make it lighter for him? It's hard to say. What went on in his mind? It says it's the world's longest improv beat poem by Tony Caravan. What does that even mean? Oh, there's a beat. Is this a poem? Well, it's an improv. It's an improvised poem, but it's a free form poem. Poem. Flow of consciousness, it says on the bottom of the Then What book with the question mark behind the name Tony Caravan. And on the corner of the screen, it says everything you know is wrong. How could everything you know be wrong? I mean, some things might be wrong. But can everything you know be wrong? And what about that deck of cards, that house of cards? What were the backs of those cards? What design did they have? Were they blue or were they red? They have some kind of like circular paisley type of pattern on them. And when did they build the house of cards on the spinning plate, on the stick, on the top of the head of the trapeze artist walking the tightrope under the big top, where the elephant was tied to a stick with a rope that it could easily have just broken free of, and caused mayhem among the crowd of peanut-eating fools, all there to watch silly human tricks are for trigs. And what are these trigs? Are they students of trigonometry? Is it a misspelling? Is it a word that means something ridiculous that somebody's going to look up on the internet? That was first conceived on a computer that was black and white? Like this screen is black and white? And like television was first black and white? And movies like Buster Keaton were in black and white, and the first photographs were in black and white. It still doesn't answer the question of the cards. The colors on the back of the cards. And what design they had. And were they either just red or blue? Are those the two primary colors of decks of cards that are used to create houses of cards on spinning plates, on sticks, on the heads of a trapeze artist who's walking the tightrope under the big top, not far from the elephant, with a rope around his neck that leads to a tiny little stick in the ground that the elephant can just walk away from. And those people with their mouths wide open as they shove peanuts and popcorn, watching the trapeze artist who has no net today, who's doing it without a net. That's what they advertised. The man moves the coffee from one part, the microphone further away, and he pours coffee into a mug that is also in black and white. And the coffee is black and white. Now the coffee beans have color. When the coffee beans grow, they look like little cherries. And then they roast them and bake them in the sun to make the beans. And then they further get roasted. And they become this brown color. And if you get a really dark roast, they start to lose even the brown color. And then when you make the coffee appears to be black. But if you spill the coffee, it's brown. So it has color. But everything seems to be in black and white. Why is that? Is it physics? When you had your earliest memories of looking up into space, if you ever did look up in space, some people have never seen the stars. They were born in the city, lived in the city. Even in the suburbs, they were on streets with many streetlights. And perhaps they saw the morning star and the moon. And why is the moon in black and white in a color world? And didn't the stars first seem like they were black and white? Then eventually we might have noticed some sparkling, a little bit of red, maybe a little bit of blue, but not really. Mostly space was black and white. And the moon was black and white. And at nighttime, the shadows were black and white. Technically, things were several shades of gray. In the early days of graphics, it was 256 shades of gray. Before color. Do you remember your first computer, or where you went to the monitor setting and you noticed that there was a thing that said millions of colors? But in the early computers, you didn't push millions of colors. Because if you selected millions of colors, it would slow down your CPU. That's how your computer processes itself. It's the processing unit. And the more color, the more processing is involved. They say dogs see in black and white. Is that true? Or is that an urban legend? What do the animals see? The man reaches for his coffee, moves the microphone, and it makes a noise. His glasses still steam up, even though the coffee has now just become what one would call warm. He's going to attempt to take the carafe. As the title card disappears from the screen and we see things in the background from a black and white world. An AM radio, tube radio, a rotary dial telephone that is 60 years old and still works. But how do we know it's 60 years old? The man spills coffee on his Ace Rewards card, which he will probably never use. Because it's only $5 off if you spend $20. And who the hell wants to spend $20? And why does my carafe leak? Said the man as he poured his coffee. The endless cup of coffee. I'm trying to empty the carafe, he said. Because only with volume can you maintain heat or cold. But I drank too much coffee, too fast. And that doesn't agree with my right eye. And why would it affect that? That makes no sense. I mean, does anything make any sense? How does anything make sense? What does making sense mean? It makes sense. Well, we have senses. Okay. So, I mean, we know we can make sense at a mint plant where they mint pennies, which some people call cents. So you can make sense at a mint plant There used to be a candy called Scent Sense. You ever taste them? They were black and white too, those candies. In a black and white world, you could get a handful of Scent Sense at a penny store, candy store, for one cent. Scent Sense that were black and white. Why do people wear black at funerals? But they also wear black tuxedos at special events and many weddings. And for the longest time, at all weddings. Devoid of color. Or is it all of the colors? Did you ever up the saturation in a computer graphics program? Turn every color up to full? And then all the colors disappeared and they all turned to black. And if you eliminated all of the colors, they became white. Why did black and white photographs, movies, television, and computer screens come first? Because of the complexity? Or because they were already overly complex? When did color begin? With the Big Bang? What was that dot? Some 13 or more billion years ago. Was it a white dot in total blackness? Like on an old TV, when you turn it off, it would just kind of, everything would just go black except for that dot, white dot in the corner. As if the TV was trying to tell you about the Big Bang. And why do they call it a black hole? When it absorbs all light and everything, allegedly. Of course, I don't believe in black holes, but why are they called black holes? Black as the night. Shadows are black. Right now it's black outside. The sun has not risen. So it's black and white world. And the white comes from the light. A trapeze artist walks a tightrope under the big top at a circus, balancing a spinning plate on a stick on his forehead, but on top of the plate is a house of cards. And the elephant looks up and watches the trapeze artiste. Does the elephant see the color of the backs of the cards that comprise the house of cards? Or are those cards black and white? If the cards are black and white, no problem for spades and clubs. But what about the hearts? The blackened heart. The Queen of Hearts has a blackened heart. Have you ever heard the term blackened soul? And how come when things burn, they turn black? Even if they once had color. A colorful tree becomes blackened. The red tip of a match stricken to light a white paper cigarette becomes black. And in the ashtray, it's just black. Or 256 shades of gray. If that. But watch out for those million colors. They'll tax your CPU. The black mirror of a smartphone when it's not on. That goes back to ancient times bewitching times. Beware of the black mirror. Black magic. Is there color? Is there such a thing as color? Or is it all black? One time I wanted to create brown paint to paint an art gallery. I purchased a building on a main street and I wanted to put a little art gallery in there. And I wanted to paint the front of it brown. But I didn't have any brown paint. But in the basement, there was some black paint left over from something. I don't know what they painted it with black. Because I didn't see any black inside this oddly shaped, thin building. It was ideal for an art gallery, but it wasn't an art gallery prior. It stood vacant for at least a decade. And I had a can of white paint. So I poured the black paint, a little bit at a time, into the can of white paint that was a little bit fuller. And the white paint began to turn brown. Where did the brown come from? White mixed with black became brown in a paint can. And I ended up with about a gallon because the white paint was about 2/3 the way up and the black can had about 1/3 of black paint in it. So we ended up with about a gallon of like this brown paint made from mixing the white with the black. And I had just enough paint to paint the front of this thin storefront that I was going to turn into an art gallery, and I did. And my first show was with two artistes, two painters, oil painters from Paris, who did an exhibit there. We had an opening. Inside the gallery with the brown front that was made from black paint mixed with white. Where did the brown come from? Where'd that can of black paint come from? Why was it in the basement to begin with? The second exhibit I had in that art gallery, I commissioned an artist who was going to be exhibiting for me on the second opening. I said, paint paint me a classic picture. This artist has since passed on. I said, paint me one of your classics. He was a modern artist. You know, kind of one of those guys that kind of throws things. He used cold tar sometimes, which is also black. But if you ever really looked at tar close up, because it's organic, that's like coffee. It's really brown when you really get down to it and kind of spread it thin. But it looks black. When you see the roads, they look like they're black. But really the stuff they're made of is kind of brown. Well, anyway, here's the interesting thing. I said, make me this big thing. I'm going to invite 100 people to the opening. And I want you to put this on a very stiff paper. Kind of a fiber type of paper. A very expensive paper. All right. Almost like a cardboard, but like a very fibery, thick paper. But not too thick that it can't be sent in the mail as a postcard. So he went about his thing and created this piece. And when the piece dried, we proceeded to cut up the painting into postcard-sized pieces. And on the back of them, we hand-addressed them to everyone we were going to invite to the opening. The artist numbered the back, and we put on there, please bring this with you to the opening, and we will put this together in the front of the gallery to reassemble the painting that you are holding 1/100th of. And everyone came, except for a few people who were out-of-towners. But they understood so well the importance that they included their postcard in an envelope with a little letter saying, sorry, I can't attend, but I didn't want you to be without this piece of the painting. So all of the people and pieces were accounted for. And we assembled the painting in the front of the gallery that night for the opening of that artist's exhibit. And that painting was predominantly black and white, though there was some other color in there. Blackened soul. The blackened heart. An elephant is gray. Where is the color? Is color necessary? Why is there color? The man lifts the coffee, moves the microphone. It makes a noise. The coffee has now become lukewarm, which is the equivalent of shades of gray. Did you ever get a deck of cards where the backs weren't red or black or blue, but rather just gray or black? How come the first copy machines were black and white? And the first printers, laser printers, were black and white. Simplicity? The nuns wear black and white, and the priests, the preachers. The black cowboy hats, the cattle rustlers. The highwaymen. This hat is black and white. This shirt is black and white. This show has nothing to do with black and white. Have you figured that one out yet? This show is about a house of cards sitting atop a spinning plate on a stick on the forehead of a trapeze artist who's walking a tightrope in a circus tent, while an elephant tied to a stick looks on, surrounded by people eating peanuts and popcorn with their mouths open, staring at the spectacle before them. Though some of the younger children are looking at the elephant, because an elephant's like a dinosaur. And kids like dinosaurs. And all kinds of things like that. Tricks are for kids. What was that thing about senses I said before? Do you remember that? doesn't make sense? How can anything make sense except a mint where they make pennies? Nothing makes sense. That's what this is about. Everything you know is wrong, and you don't know what you don't know. Nothing makes sense except a mint plant. When I was a kid, we used to take a cent, a penny, and we had a train that used to come through our town. And we would place the penny on the track. And when the train would come, it would ride over the penny. And it wouldn't drag it along for some reason. I don't know why. This heavy locomotive. And when the train passed, we would run to the track, and there would be our penny completely flattened out. Something that was once the size of 1 cent piece was now as big as a silver dollar, because the train had flattened out the penny and there was nothing readable on it. And the silver dollar in those days was made of silver. And silver is gray, kind of. So it's within that world of the black and white 256 shades of gray. But how could you say that something makes sense or doesn't make sense? I mean, you have senses, okay? And we talked about sense, the black and white candy that used to get a handful for a penny, that was made at a mint where they made cents. You could buy cents. But how can something make sense or not make sense that is not a plant where they make sense? Pennies, I mean. Think about that. You have the sense of smell. Does that make sense? You see things. Does that make sense? How does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. It is a sense. You have sensations. You can hear my voice and the bass player. The bass player is getting tired. He has band-aids on the tips of his fingers to keep them from bleeding, even though he has long since developed calluses to keep the tips of those fingers strong. But in order to play the world's longest improv beat poem in black and white, he had to put tape on the tips of his fingers. But that tape is starting to loosen now. And the tape is adhesive tape, the kind in which you put a bandage on a wound. That white tape. Like gauze tape. You know, the tape when you put the gauze on the wound, that's white. Why is a stethoscope a doctor use? Black at the end. Or how about that thing they stick in your ear to look inside, the tip of it? Why is that black? Ever notice that? Is there color? Many people have black hair. I have a black cat. Though sometimes in the sun, it appears to be partially brownish. Kind of like that can of white paint that I poured the black paint into and ended up with brown paint to paint the art gallery where I had the opening, where we cut a painting into 100 pieces and then reassembled it on the wall in the foyer of the gallery for the opening. A painting that was predominantly black. Not only were TVs first black and white, but the tubes that went into them were black. Though they had silver ends on the end of them. But silver, like a Kennedy half, is really just a shade of gray. Like JFK. A coin has 3 sides, not 2. So many people forget that. The third sign of the coin. Sign? Oops, I slipped. I almost gave away the Rosicrucian Knights Templar gold coin, which definitely was not black and white. A coin has 3 sides. It's 3D. 3 dimensions. Dimensions have no color. Just like space has no color. The air is colorless. What color is water? Clear? Look at that. What color is the air? What color is the water? Doesn't make sense, does it? It's the color clear? Can you buy a tube, a jar, a can of clear? You can get silicone, but that's not really clear. It's kind of, there's some gray in there, you know? There's some gray in that. It's not clear. And you can buy various top coats, clear coats, polymers of some kind to put over top of something. But just like the tar that looks black, or the asphalt on the road that seems black, when you look very closely at those top coats, clear coats you put over top, they kind of have a brownish tint to them, don't they? They do. And if you put like a lot of coats, you'll notice that it's no longer clear if you're coating a table or some kind of thing with a polyurethane clear coat. It's not clear. There's like a little bit of brown tint in it. Just like the asphalt and the tar. And me mixing the white paint with the black paint, and somehow it created brown. In the gallery, where we cut the painting into 100 pictures, postcards, and then reassembled them into a painting. The gray elephant looks up at the trapeze artist on the tightrope with a stick on his forehead and a spinning plate, but atop the spinning plate is a house of cards. How is that possible to have a house of cards on a spinning plate? It's not. The house of cards would just flip all over like something they used to call pitchies. Do you know what pitchies are? Pitchies are when you take a baseball card that you purchase in a pack that you also get a stick of gum with. And you take those baseball cards and you put them at an angle against a wall or a porch step, and you stand back about 4 or 5, 6 feet maybe. And then you pitch other cards at them. And if you are able to knock down the card, the baseball card, with your pitched card, you get to keep the card that you knock down. It's called pitchies. People don't do that anymore. The tires on trucks and cars are black. Why is that? They're not really made of rubber. They stopped making them from rubber from back in the WW2 days when they needed that rubber for the war effort. So when you move all the colors in your program, your photographic program, when you move them all from 0 to 100, it turns black. So black is all of the colors. But white is not really devoid of color. What is white? See, if there is no color, it's clear. Like the air, or what they call the cool, clear water. Something you can see through. See, that makes sense because you're using the sense of your eyes, right? The eyes are one of your 6 senses. Yes, 6 senses. Because we all have 6 senses. It's just most people just don't use the 6th sense. But for some people, that doesn't make sense. To them, only the U.S. Mint can make sense. Pennies, that is. Color doesn't make sense. You don't make sense. Right? Do you make sense? Am I making sense right now? Does anyone make sense? Does anything make sense? Besides the machine at the U.S. Mint. And how much longer will they make sense in a digital world that started out in black and white? Yet black already had all of the colors in it. And still does. It's just a matter of extrapolating those colors. So was the black and white photo more complex than the color photo? It doesn't make sense. People just weren't aware of it at the time. Now, what about things that are outside of reality? Or can a thing be outside of reality? Or what about thoughts, ideas, ideologies? Do they make sense? Can you sense them with your senses? The human bioelectric brain is not a sense, right? It's just a computational machine, bioelectric, computational device atop of an android body. So is an idea a color? Is an idea make sense? Is an idea tangible? What is an idea? What is an ideology? Coffee looks black, but if you spill it on a napkin, it appears brown. It also gets cold quickly. Ha, 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 said the man. But let's get back to the concept. Or how can we use the word concept? What is a concept? How do you conceive with a bioelectric computational device? You conceive something. What is that? How do you conceive something? How do you have an idea? What is an idea? I have an idea. What is that? A call to action? A motivation for action? What is action? The act of doing something. But the idea, the concept, in it upon itself, what is that? Conceiving something in a bioelectric computational unit encased in a hard bone skull in pure darkness, blackness. Do you know what they call the brain, some people? They call it gray matter. There we go with that 256 shades of gray again. Maybe even less. In the early computers, there were like 16 shades of gray. 16. Do you remember the dot matrix printer? You ever see an old newspaper? And if you look very closely with a magnifying glass, do you know what a magnifying glass is? And if you take a magnifying glass to a photo that was made in an old printing process, remember newspapers are in black and white until USA Today came along, right? And then they all put color. But the newspapers were black and white. Well, you take a magnifying glass to a photo on a paper prior to the colorization age of print, and you'll see that that photo is comprised of dots. Thousands and thousands of dots. Black and white dots. In the modern day, they would refer to them as pixels. And then eventually there was RGB. Red, green, blue. And they became the pixels. And as one of those became more intense, that would create the color. Kind of like the mixing of the pigment of the white and the black to create brown, which still seems to be a mystery. But then again, it's not a mystery if black is all colors combined. But back to the idea. What is an idea? What is an idea? Some people hear sounds as colors. That's weird. Some people smell colors. What does that say about our senses? Doesn't make sense to us. But to those people, it makes sense. Makes perfect sense. But how can anything make sense? Except the U.S. Mint, or I guess a private company that mints coins. But only the U.S. Mint can mint cents. U.S. cents, 1 penny. The blackened heart on the queen, on the card, the black and white deck of cards, that house of cards on the spinning plate on the stick of the head of the trapeze artist walking the tightrope in the big top circus tent, without a net underneath him, with the gray elephant tied with a little rope to a little stick, looking on, the same as those popcorn peanut eating people in the bleachers, which are usually gray in those days. Old wood turns gray, and when it burns, it turns black. The moon is gray. The night is black. Everything you know is wrong. You don't know what you don't know. And I'm telling you, it's game over. And you just don't see it because you see the world in black and white. That's the problem. You see the world in black and white. You have no idea that the world is in color. You just don't see it. The world is in color, my friends. It's a world of color. That poor bass player. His fingers must be driving him crazy at this point. Hey, you! The tape fall off yet? Nothing makes sense. Everything you know is wrong. You don't know what you don't know. And you're ready for the kicker. You're really ready for the kicker? You knew this was coming. Didn't you? You were waiting for it. Right? You're waiting for it. Are you still watching? Did you make it this far? You're waiting for it. Had to come at some point. You ready? The House of Cards was never on that plate. Because you can't build a house of cards on a spinning plate, on a stick, on the head of a trapeze artist walking a tightrope without a net, with a gray elephant tied with a little string and a stick looking on, with a bunch of people eating popcorn and peanuts on gray bleachers under the big top. So the that doesn't make sense. You're living in a house of cards on a spinning planet, a spinning globe. It's revolving around the sun, and the sun is revolving around a galaxy, and the galaxies are moving around a universe that we've been told is created by a big bang, that is likened to a 1960s or 50s black and white television set being turned off and it started with that white dot. Well, the house of cards can't exist on a spinning anything. Like the other childhood's game, we all ashes, which are black and white, 256 shades of gray. Ashes, we all fall down. The house of cards has fallen already. And that spinning plate on the stick of the head of the trapeze artiste on a tightrope without a net that the elephant is looking on, those cards are just sitting on that plate, and the plate is spinning, and those cards are flicking out all over, and the kids can't decide whether they want to try to reach and grab a card or hold on to their bag of peanuts or popcorn, because they don't know if they would rather stuff their faces or have one of those cards. And the most sought after card is the one with the blackened heart. And that's what we live in right now. A fallen house of cards. And the kings and queens and jacks have blackened hearts. And everything you know is wrong. And you don't know what you don't know, and you don't even know it's game over. You don't understand color. You don't understand senses. Nothing makes sense. You're not using your senses. Ideologies don't exist. They're not real. You can't sense it. You can't see it. What is clear? What is clear? Can you paint me a picture of clear? Like the fraudulent artist in the galleries in the major cities where they put out a canvas, a white canvas, and they say, this is art, and I will pay anywhere from $30,000 to $1 million for that because I get it, says the self-proclaimed ruling elitist who has made their fortune on Bitcoin or the bond market or short selling and other exotic Wall Street ways of manipulating markets, things that the common man can't do even if they wanted to. Yes, it's a work of art. Now there's someone else out there thinking, that guy gives me an idea. First of all, I like the idea about his gallery. I'm going to copy that. But then he's going, I got another idea. I'm going to take some clear plastic and I'm going to make that into like a 6 by 6 feet hangable piece and put that in a gallery and see if I can't make $30,000 to $1 million, because I will have created something that is clear Well, let me tell you something. Plastic isn't clear. And you say, well, I'll make it out of glass. Well, glass isn't clear either. Do you ever watch a glass blower, somebody who uses when you heat up glass? You know, glass is made from sand. It's got all the colors in it. But I thought you just said that black had all the colors in it. How could clear, something clear, have all these colors in it? Are those colors coming from the flame? The heat? And how can I see through it? Well, you can see through it, but it's not really clear. It's not clear like the air, right? What color is clear? What tube or can or bottle does that come in? In a bottle of water, it's clear. No, it's not really. Do you ever look at water under a microscope? It's anything but clear. Do you ever look at filtered water under a microscope? Even these big filters that they claim filter out all the imperfections and impurities. Do you ever look at that water under a microscope? An electron microscope. It's anything but clear. All kinds of stuff in there. Colorful stuff. So is the air really clear? No, not really. There's all kinds of gases in the air. And let's not forget there's 0.004 CO2 in the air. Oh, and that has so many people so afraid. And yes, you knew that was coming. Just like you knew that the absurdity of politics as pop culture had to be mentioned, and the cult of personality, the ideology, the idea that you just don't get it, that the game is over and the league has disbanded. And you are just wasting your time. But then again, what is time? What color is time? Can you bottle time? Time in a bottle. Remember that song? Grab those cards. Especially the ones with the blackened hearts. Those are the cards. Those are the true cards. The ones that flew off of that plate on top of the stick, spinning on the head of the trapeze artist, walking the tightrope without a net below him, and the elephant just looking up, wondering, but frozen still because it thinks that it can't move because of that little piece of rope on that tiny stick. And the kids eating their popcorn and peanuts next to the adults on the gray bleachers under the big top. It's a circus. That's what it is. It's one big circus with a house of cards. And there's no net underneath that's going to catch you when you fall. And you are so glued to your blackened heart, and you believe so strongly in that house of cards. And despite your size, you have no idea that that string, that piece of rope on that stick, that you could just walk away right now. It's not holding you down. You're all grown up now. The world's in living color. Do you get it yet? Can you use your senses to see, hear, smell, touch? Or how about that sixth sense? Without getting into the woo, 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 woo. Just common sense as a sixth sense. Common sense. A feeling in your gut. We know we have a neural network down there too. There's one around your heart too. Did you know that? It's true. Ideologies are not real. They don't exist. Politics is not real. Everything you know is wrong, and you don't know what you don't know. It's game over. Washington, D.C. is a house of cards in black and white, and the hearts are blackened hearts. The king, queen, and jacks have blackened hearts. And that house of cards is falling. And the odd thing about it is, you are propping it up with a stick on your head, walking a tightrope, and there's no net underneath of you. The elephant left the room. It figured it out now. It walked out of the tent. Elephants are nice, so it didn't go near the crowd, though the crowd screamed when the elephant broke free of its tiny little rope on that tiny little stick. And the mean man with the whip and the chair, who usually whips the line through the hoops of fire, ran after the elephant with its whip, yelling. But the elephant just kept going, because the elephant realized that that little tiny man with his little whip could no longer hurt him. And he no longer wanted to be a part of the circus. And now we have the people on the gray bleachers eating their popcorn and peanuts. Those who haven't fled out of fear, still watching the man on the tightrope. spinning a plate on a stick with a house of cards that long since has flown in every direction. Some of them landed on feces from the circus horses, the elephants, and other animals that were brought out to entertain. These foolish people on these gray bleachers, watching the circus, caught up in a circus. The house of cards fell, but the elephant left the room. But they're still sitting on the bleachers, eating their popcorn and peanuts, watching the man on the tightrope, spinning a plate on a head. That's you. That's what you're doing. It's game over. Washington, D.C. is a circus. It's a circus that had a house of cards. That house of cards has fallen. Everything you know is wrong. You don't know what you don't know. It's game over. And you just won't let go. You just won't leave. Everybody out now. The circus is over. Time to go home. Don't you get it? You don't get it. You did this. You're responsible. And the longer you sit on those bleachers, the longer this insanity goes on. It's pathetic.